The whole reason this place became a national park was the idea of how open it was. For a while, it kept a lot of people out because it was daunting to get up to. The Sierra is no easy feat to hike in.
Yosemite is a place of rest, a refuge. Nowhere will you find more company of a soothing peace be still kind.
You know what this needs? A hotel.
None can escape its charms. Its natural beauty cleans and warms like a fire, and you'll be willing to stay forever in one place like a tree.
There's just something special about it when you walk out in the middle of a meadow, or you hike to the base of a waterfall, or you hike to the top of a dome. It's just like this very majestic feeling.
To realize that everything in the universe is connected is to both accept our insignificance and understand our importance in it.
I was always taught when I was learning how to weave baskets that you want to talk to the plants and you want to laugh with the plants, because the plants want to be a basket. They just need your help to do it.
For a lot of us, nature's a bit like a theme park. Drop in a token, go on a scenic drive. Drop in another token, take a walk. Drop in a token, look at a bear.
Would you say the odds of us seeing a bear today are very good? You're unbearable.
And so realizing that we're in these wild places and they're not a zoo.
I was told this was the land of bears, and I haven't seen a single one.
Let me try speaking bear to someone.
Let's try it. Here, I'll do it.
And I think the acknowledgement of that aspect, it's much more than a playground, might lead to people respecting it a little bit more.
One of the many keystone species here in Yosemite is the bear. Here in Yosemite, bears are so very cool, and they are integral to the environment here.
It's going to take a lot of effort. It's not going to change overnight, but I think just being aware, having that awareness that our effects on the landscape, whether it's just walking on a social trail or picking a flower that they see is really pretty, but maybe an insect hasn't pollinated it yet.
It's easy to see how it could be a challenge when so many of us live lives totally alienated from anything that resembles wild.
Or being respectful to wildlife, because essentially we're in their home.
Little reminders of just how wild Yosemite is can be seen virtually everywhere in the park. But for all the wild nature, Yosemite has that same comfortable feeling that all the American national parks have.
Well, kind of also Muir didn't want to do it either. He didn't want to spend his time with a bureaucrat.
Not surprisingly, history is complicated.
How do we determine these sites and if they're really well protected? This is the most overgrown this valley's ever looked.
The Yosemite you see today is a largely overgrown park compared to what it used to be even as recently as 80 years ago. And the overgrowth doesn't have to be a bad part of the story. Maybe we've done a little too much to protect the land.
Because the way the natives took care of it is this was their marketplace. Everything was found right around from them.
Muir's challenge was in dealing with the ultimate bureaucrat, Theodore Roosevelt. TR was certainly a man who didn't shy away from danger or adventure. I mean, the guy's most famous quote is, "Speak softly and carry a big stick."
He saw these landscapes as something that needed to be protected.
And protection was a fairly new idea for this era.
But at the same time had these weird ideas that things should be kept natural.
Which might have made Muir a little bit nervous because, of course, TR had a few thoughts on conservation, such as conservation means development as much as it does protection. And honestly, it's a way of thinking that hasn't changed in over 100 years.
So there were some sort of management preservation ideas there, but at that point, when it was a state park, was still kind of like a free-for-all. There was no really overarching standard.
And so in 1903, TR made it to Yosemite for what has become the most famous camping trip in history. With John Muir as his guide, the two set out for 3 days of high adventure on a trip that would bring to life the Yosemite we all know and love today.
And so they ended up, their first night was Mariposa Grove, where they camped underneath the Grizzly Giant. And then they went up towards Glacier Point for a night, got snowed on because it was the spring. And the big takeaway from that meeting was that Yosemite Valley and the Mariposa Grove needed to be encompassed within the national park boundary.
Full of passion, Roosevelt returned to Washington and campaigned hard for what became known as the Antiquities Act.
And so you just see a lot of different transitions, and I think that mentality had always been there, but there had never been any formal agencies or anything to help them along. It was kind of just people like, we should do this.
You know, these are things that just seem like a good idea at the time, like hanging out at a table with bears or keeping a pet tiger.
I've also have wondered too, what would have happened if it never got discovered? Because the natives that had lived here burned the landscape pretty regularly and left it so open because it allowed for new nutrients, it helped the animals, it helped the plants, everything that they needed to make their civilization off of. When more and more non-natives entered the valley, they were like, why are you doing this? Like, you're making it dirty because it's going to be black for a few months at a time.
On the West Coast, wildfire is certainly on people's minds more than it's ever been in the last century.
I think it's more so just the tribes in general. I mean, there's 7 tribes here, and they were all very similar, but they were also very different. And they viewed the landscape pretty similarly, but they used it differently. And getting those 7 voices does tell a big part of the story. And I would stem it to like the traditional ecological knowledge of like passing it down through generations of everything has a meaning, everything's connected. I was always taught when I was learning how to weave baskets that you want to talk to the plants and you want to laugh with the plants because the plants want to be a basket, they just need your help to do it.